We got a Legal AF alert. New contributor alert. New contributor alert. We've got Shant and Brian, who come together on a playlist and podcast we call Civil Action. They are tremendous national trial lawyers. Phenomenal. I mean, they are, if you need a trial lawyer in your jurisdiction or any jurisdiction, and you have a major matter that's turned your world upside down, Shant and Brian. But what they bring here is a unique set of views that's developed by being in the courtrooms and the courthouses that we talk about on a regular basis on Legal AF. Some of our contributors are former prosecutors. Some of them, like me, practice in the world of civil and or criminal law or constitutional law. And so to bring on Brian and Shant and their new show, Civil Action, I think you're really going to enjoy what they have to say in this first clip, this first time together here on our show. They're talking about judicial independence and the attacks and the threats on our judiciary from a practitioner standpoint. I think it's fascinating. Hopefully you will too. Here is Shant and Brian on a Civil Action.
Hey everyone, welcome to Civil Action. I'm Shant Karnikian. I'm joined by my law partner, Brian Kabateck. We're two attorneys at a firm called Kabateck LLP. We have a nationwide practice. And this is a show where we cover various interesting legal issues that come up, whether it's in politics, between the courts and politics, and on various levels throughout the country and on the state level as well. So, hi, Brian.
Sean, always good to see you.
Yeah, very exciting stuff today. Well, what are we going to cover, Brian?
Well, I think one thing I want to talk about, generally speaking, is the problem that happens when courts and judges are under attack, which we see an awful lot of these days. But I can guarantee you, having done this for my entire adult life, judges are always attacked, right? What's the definition of a great judge? In case you win. What's the definition of a horrible judge, an activist judge, a bad judge? In case you lose. So it's always going to be a situation where somebody is probably not happy with the judge or with what happened in court or with what the court did, the judge did, and how that kind of plays out in the real world. And I want to start with basically one premise here, which is judges can't defend themselves. The canons of judicial ethics, the rules that apply to judges, they can't come out in the media or elsewhere and say, no, let me explain why I really did the right thing. Let me explain why this is the right decision. That just isn't allowed to happen. So if we start with that as the foundation of our discussion about the problem with attacking judges, I think people have to understand kind of where to go from there.
Yeah, and I think an important principle in order to understand what you said, that's exactly right. Judges can't defend themselves. They're not politicians. They aren't people that run for office, especially federal judges, what are called Article 3 judges. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And that's what I was going to say. It's important to understand where judges sort of come from, how judges get their position. And once you understand that, you start to realize that it's very unfair to go after judges. It's not just unfair in a moral sense. It's also unfair because it totally undermines how the system works, right? Our checks and balances, the three branches of government, it all falls apart if you don't follow what judges say. If actors within our society, within our system, do not follow what judges say, the whole republic collapses if you do that.
But what happens when a judge is attacked? And look, I've seen this long before Trump became president, but on a very small scale. I've seen lawyers that go in the press and say, this judge was terrible. He or she was prejudiced against me. They made terrible rulings. Why have they done this? I've seen judges attacked on individual cases nationally because they give a lenient sentence to somebody that the public perceives as being a heinous criminal, and they get attacked, they get recalled. There are all kinds of issues like that. But what happens when that happens is really something that I don't think most people completely understand. Now, I've spent, more than 3 decades, going on 4 decades in the judicial system. I've served on committees. I've served on national committees, statewide committees, local committees with judges. And I know one thing is that judges are deeply offended when other judges are attacked.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter. I think, well, sometimes it does matter. I guess you do have some preferences and leanings, but I think when their credibility or when their rulings are not just their ruling, when they're personally attacked, and any actor, perfect example is Donald Trump. When any actor does something to undermine a judge's authority, not their judicial thinking, not their reasoning, not a legitimate disagreement about legal reasoning, but someone to undermine their authority. This judge is a, crazy liberal, radical, leftist, something like that.
Yeah. And that's a big difference between the judge got it wrong because.
Yeah, that's right.
I disagree with the judge's ruling, and I think he's going to get overturned in the Court of Appeal or whatever. That's okay. I mean, that's as long as it doesn't. But you cross the line when it becomes personal. An activist judge, an unelected judge making, telling the president what he can and can't do. This judge, I mean, what's his agenda? What are they?
They make for great sound bites, that's why. And it makes for great sound bites. The average person hears that and they sometimes buy into that. And it helps, kind of push this narrative of these judges being unfair. And that's all sometimes people want to look at.
Right, you know who else hears it? Other judges.
Yeah.
Other judges. And you know who else hears it? Judges on the United States Supreme Court hear it also.
Yeah. Then that's what I was going to say earlier. Brian, how do you find that other judges feel about judges being attacked?
They're deeply offended.
Yeah.
They feel like their office is being attacked when that happens.
Right.
The judicial system itself is set up so that there are reviews and checks and balances. It's imperfect. It is an imperfect system, right?
Right.
And the definition of an outrageous verdict is one where you lose, right?
Right.
So this permeates the system. But once you got into personal attacks, that's just not acceptable to other judges, right? And so what are those other judges going to do? Well, the first thing the public needs to remember about judges is they're human. They're also real people who have friends and colleagues in their business, and they don't like it.
Yeah. And when it's based, again, putting aside legitimate disagreements over legal reasoning, someone got it wrong because, and you give an actual explanation aside from name calling, putting that aside, whenever those attacks happen, I think it undermines, and you said this a moment ago, the office. It undermines their role. It doesn't just undermine them. It doesn't just offend one individual who is being attacked. It undermines the entire role that these people play in our system. This office, this position plays in our system. And it's a major problem because the orders issued by that office, by that judge, not just by the individual, but that individual is embodying a position of decision making. It undermines the power to be able to control things in our system. When a dispute happens, a legitimate dispute happens, when you look at things recently under Trump administration or in other contexts, when you have a decision maker deciding how that dispute shakes out, there's a reason why it's a final decision. You need to abide by it.
And the other thing I've learned from being around judges and serving on these committees with judges is, shockingly, judges talk to each other.
Yeah.
A lot. I mean, one of the things about the office of a judge, whether it's a state court judge, an appellate judge, a federal judge, a court of appeals judge, Supreme Court judge, they because of their position, it's very difficult for them to have close personal relationships with lawyers, with individual lawyers, trial lawyers like us. So a lot of times their friendships and their colleagues are their colleagues on the bench, and they'll go into the lunchroom and they'll talk. And they're people, so they talk about the same things we talk about. And human nature being what it is, they also create certain subtle biases in their own mind and in their own world. And, can you guess how those biases are going to play out later?
Yeah. So what do you think? Let's tie it back into the political context now with someone like Trump that's been attacking, one of his whole MO is to go after in the media the judges that make decisions against him. And again, we're not talking about, even if it's a politician or someone, a private party saying the judge got it wrong because, and here's a list of, legal reasoning and things like that, a legitimate complaint or a legitimate response to a judge's decision. No, we're talking about going after someone and calling them corrupt with no evidence, calling them an anarchist.
Let's be very specific here. One of the judges that the Trump administration has attacked was Brett Kavanaugh's, I know he was his classmate. I believe they were roommates in law school. I believe they lived together in law school. So the practical reasoning there is you attack somebody like that. You call them an activist judge. You insult them. You insult their not just their decisions, but who they are. Do you think Brett Kavanaugh, when a case comes to the United States Supreme Court involving the Trump administration, do you think he's going to look at that and be able to completely put out of his mind the fact that they attacked his buddy?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't think so. It's going to explore their decisions. Yeah. It's going to,
going back to what you were saying too, Shant, sorry to interrupt you, but I'm going to do it anyways because I'm older. Putting aside what you were saying, what we're talking about now, just saying this is that if you attack its decision, I think most judges, a higher court, review court, whether it's the Supreme Court or the Court of Appeals, would say they'd put that aside and they'd look at the four corners of the decision, the legal issues, and evaluate. But when there's an attack on the judge personally, I think you have to realistically understand it's a lot less likely that in that situation, the reviewing judge is going to completely be able to put in a box what he or she knows about the attacks on the lower court judge.
And I don't think you're right. I agree. And I don't think that unwillingness to put their, biases aside or them being, their opinion being shaped by what that person did, someone like Trump did. It's not necessarily because they start to hate Trump or something. It's because Trump's actions or words undermined the entire institution, the entire judiciary, and the entire judicial system. I think that's why they're kind of pissed off at Trump, and that's why they would sort of let that opinion shape their decision.
I mostly agree with you. I'm like 90% of the way there, but I don't think you can completely discount at some point these judges going, enough is enough. I mean, This guy and his administration are so kind of, screwed up in the way they attack things. It's got to be a cumulative effect. There's got to be a cumulative effect of that. I think that's without a doubt. And I think it makes them look at this askew. I want to kind of running out of time here on this topic.
I had a question for you before we kind of wrap this up. Well, what's your response? One of the taglines that we keep hearing are, some unelected judge is telling us what to do, or some unelected judge is deciding whether some law can stand. I mean, what's your response to that? The sort of criticism that they're not elected?
Well, I think, first of all, we should do another session where we kind of talk about the judiciary and the Constitution and how it works in various states. So, of course, they're unelected. That's the whole point, right? They're beyond the reach of elections, at least at the federal level and in some states, not all states. The other is that's the system that exists, is its checks and balances. And what I was going to say about this is, of course, there's the very famous Shakespearean line about the first thing we do is kill all the lawyers. And the context of that line is it was said at a time when the person coming into power wanted to get rid of the lawyers because they wanted to do whatever they could without any restriction, without any checks and balances. And although it's not in Shakespeare, I think it's fair to say you would read into that. The next line would be, and the next thing we do is kill all the judges, because the judges are the ones that that rule on the validity of the law. And so I could clearly see the Trump administration adopting a policy of the next thing you do is kill all the judges.
You've been around for a long time, Brian, a really, really long time.
Thanks.
But no, all kidding aside, have you ever seen any other administration or president or member of an administration go after the judiciary, go after judges this hard?
No.
Ever, right?
No. Look, there have been lots of decisions which have come down in various presidential administrations where the sitting president or his administration might well say, I disagree, this is wrong, blah, blah, blah. I cannot, in my little fading memory, I can't remember a single time where the judges were individually attacked. Oh, but maybe, There certainly may be, but not to this extent.
Right.
Not like this.
You can't even remember one example. So yeah, it's certainly not to this extent.
I can't. I mean, we've seen nominees attacked.
Sure.
By the opposing party. We've seen justices attacked. Like a perfect example of that would be Clarence Thomas. Clarence Thomas has been under a high degree of scrutiny over the years from allegedly accepted gifts for his conduct. There was a long period of time where Justice Thomas wouldn't ask any questions in the oral argument. He would sort of follow whatever Scalia did. Those kinds of things have been pointed out and probably pointed out by, Democratic administrations. But I've never seen anything like this. And though we're running out of time here, at some point we should also talk about the effect that this has had on rank and file lawyers, what it means and what it could mean in the future for a whole new generation of lawyers that are coming out of law school today, next year, the year after, and how they're going to see things. So there's an awful lot to unpack here, but today we just wanted to focus on this one very isolated issue, which is do not think for a minute that when you attack a judge, that other judges aren't listening. They are listening loud and clear, and they hear exactly what you're doing.
And it's going to come full circle, probably, or hopefully. Well, thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And I'm Shant Karnikian. That was Brian Kabateck. This is Civil Action. If you have any questions or things you want us to cover, if you're a fan, if you hate us, whatever, just your feedback would be appreciated. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.
Welcome back. I think that makes about 14 different contributors that we have here, all at the intersection of law and politics. Shant and Brian join. Let's just go down the list. It's complicated. Asha and Renato. They're former federal prosecutors, FBI agents, and national security experts, and they do an amazing show called It's Complicated once a week. We got Court Accountability Action, Lisa Graves, Alex Aronson, and Mike Sachs. I defy you to find a YouTube channel that has the quality of guests and interviewees that they bring on this show, from Jamie Raskin to Russ Feingold and everything in between. Just amazing and fascinating group of people. Shan Wu, former Attorney General, former General Counsel for the Attorney General of the United States and a former prosecutor and white-collar criminal defense lawyer. We got Dina Dahl, who's a fascinating legal commentator and expert on the Constitution. She does Unprecedented with me once a week. This is kind of a viewing guide that's broken out here. We got Dave Arenberg, Florida law guy, former Florida prosecutor, state attorney in Palm Beach County, who I'm sure I'm forgetting people. We've got, how could I forget, Court of History. It's like murders in the building, except it's historical context. Brought to you by Sidney Blumenthal and Sean Wallentz. Court of History, the highest court in the land. And I think, I'm sure I left out somebody, and you'll remind me. And I got a couple of more that are coming down the pike in the next 2 or 3 weeks, I think, just to round out what we're doing here. So thanks for being here with Shant and Brian. I'm Michael Popak. I'm the chief curator, chief cook and bottle washer here on Legal AF for the Midas Touch Network. So until the next Civil Action, I'm Michael Popak reporting. Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.